while we suffer a few hundred casualties in terms of deaths, no, from the virus, we will have thousands of people that will die from hunger or panic or from other situations.
What if the lockdown would last? I've seen some projections that they said the peak of the coronavirus in the Philippines will be up until May. What if the lockdown extends up until June and I'm an entrepreneur right now? Uh, what's the best thing that they can do when all of this is something that they can't control anymore?
Well, it's like I don't think that many small entrepreneurs can survive, no? Because even the malls that they're renting from for the restaurants and other businesses, they're only given a 1 month reprieve or something like that. But in reality, if you were to say that this is going to hang on for another 2 or 3 or 4 months, then it's impossible for businesses to be. The problem is that it's okay if the businesses were just to close, meaning say they close. They don't need to pay any employee salaries. They don't need to pay for any rentals. They don't need to pay for any utilities. But no, what the government wants them to do is to still pay the employees, is to still pay taxes, is to still pay all of these uh, overhead expenses like rentals. So how do you do that as a businessman? How do you maintain paying for all of these things?
Hi guys, we are in again for another treat during this lockdown. We have George Chua, a longtime entrepreneur, executive with vast experience in different industries from finance and technology as well. So I think this is very, very timely, George. There's a lot of entrepreneurs right now that need a lot of advice, need a lot of help, especially that we are in a very, very different situation. No one at the start of the year projected this to happen. No one forecasted that this could possibly happen as well. So we'd like to glean into your years of wisdom. Now, my first question is this. If you are an entrepreneur right now, sales are not coming in, you're having a hard time, how what's your advice to them? How should they navigate this particular era that we are in?
Well, first of all, as you get older, you go through these different cycles of a downturn in the economy, whether it's caused by natural events or calamities, or it's caused by economic situation of simply a downturn in the economy, or things like this, like you have something like the coronavirus that comes out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
So in reality, we all know that the party ends sometimes, and that it's always a good thing for entrepreneurs to think of their businesses as a long-term proposition. If you think about it, we've had a very good long run over more than a decade, but in reality, that's a correction has long been overdue, which is, I believe, from time to time uh, healthy, so that it allows us to catch up with ourselves.
Mm.
As we have seen, we have many indicators of an economy that is getting unsustainable, such as very high prices in our real estate, higher and higher wages, higher rentals, and so on. So I think this is a wake-up call for all of us, so that it'll give us some time to pause and catch our breath, so that we can build up for another upswing in the economy.
Mm. You mentioned about real estate prices are a bit too high already. Is it are we closing into a crash in the real estate market? Will prices go drastically lower because of this? And I think context also, it went up because of Pogo. Prices have gone up because Filipinos were just pricing everything higher because of those Chinese because of their Chinese tenants as well.
I think you're correct. No, the telltale signs are there. We have seen that the Chinese have come up with a formula to enable them to have a higher rental rate, which is by pushing in more tenants or more people to live in the same space
Mm.
for the same square meters. No? So in reality, they're paying for the same thing on a per head count basis, but in reality, they've been able to push up the prices
Mm.
and therefore giving themselves a better options as compared to people who would normally rent on a per family or a, per person basis, rather than having it say, okay, 8 of us will stay here, 50 of us will stay here, or something like that. That's why we can afford to pay 10 times more,
Mm. Mm.
something like that.
Okay, but will should people be scared that they, for especially for those who bought over the past 2 years, that what they bought is something that might go lower in value, or there's nothing to be scared about at this time?
Well, first of all, I think we should realize that even the Chinese government itself is not comfortable with having pogos. As a matter of fact, they did come up with various regulations limiting what is allowed for what is allowed for pogos. No, plus of course the fact that maybe the global awakening of the over dependence on the Chinese economy is a wake-up call again, with especially with the virus, the Wuhan virus that was supposed to have been originated from China, is another wake-up call whereby people will learn to understand that they cannot be totally dependent on China, which is a very big part of our supply chain. The other situation there is, of course, unfortunately for people like us, we found out that the test kits that we were supposed to have been given are only effective for 30%. So I guess that doesn't help us any. And it just gives us more reason to think about our relationship with China in terms of supplying us with many things and being reliant on them for cheap
Mhm.
things, reliant on them for businesses, rentals, and so on.
Okay. That being said, no, should Pogo slow down and we see those units become vacant, and then I'm a unit owner, for example, and then I have bills to pay, I have amortizations to pay. Then suddenly, because the economy is slowing down, I might have a hard time paying my amortization also. How do you suggest that they navigate that, and what could they possibly do?
Well, first of all, I think we have the makings already of a downturn in the economy, whereby many people will lose their jobs, not just in the Philippines, but in many other places, including China. And that will lead to, of course, less demand for what the Pogos offer. And
Mm-mm.
of course, being less demand and having less opportunities for that type of business will mean to say that the need for infrastructure such as the uh, 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 rentals and things like that will also go down and limit our ability to rent out these places, which will obviously depress the prices.
Mhm, mhm. I I I I wanted to note on what you said, no, that we are seeing that this is already something that will depress things globally, and it's
For
already.
sure, this is already for sure. It's already, the writing is in the wall already. This is not something that may or may not happen, but certainly the shutdowns that have been put in place in China, in the United States, Europe, even in the Philippines, uh, already runs into weeks, if not months,
Mm,
and therefore, even the government is appealing to its small businesses uh, to find a way to give salaries to their employees,
mhm, mhm.
in spite of the fact that we are on lockdown and a lot of other countries are on lockdown.
Um, that being said, no, it's also evident that oil prices are low because there's a lack of demand in Saudi,
Correct.
and Russia were fighting over it, and then Saudi increased the production, bringing prices lower. That being said, there's a low demand, and there's a lockdown. Everything's closed. What should business owners do right now?
Yeah. Well, first of all, not to forget that we are very heavily dependent on overseas Filipino workers, and a lot of them are in the Middle East. And of course, the Middle East is so dependent on petroleum products. And once the petroleum products don't bring in the kind of returns that they used to, this will mean to say that the Filipinos will either be have to take less pay or be out of a job. No, so I think that that's very clear that we being so dependent on our OFWs, which is oil dependent, which a big chunk of them come from the Middle East, will undoubtedly affect us.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that uh, there is no escaping that. No. So what are the small and medium sized entrepreneurs supposed to do? Actually, they're caught between a rock and a hard place, in the sense that the government forces them on a lockdown. Okay, meaning to say that being in a lockdown, unless you were operating a hospital or a bank or something like that, then you really couldn't be operating. Even if you were operating a restaurant, which is food, which you could argue that, well, that's essential, but even that is the restaurant as we would traditionally know it is no longer operating as such. No? And therefore, there is no revenue source for these businessmen. And what we're really looking at is also the other whammy, which is what the government is asking us to do, to keep on paying our employees or even advancing the 13th month pay. So I don't know how they expect us to do that. You see, in their case, when we were even talking about the delay in the payment of the uh, income tax, which is supposed to be April 15th, even that took them a long time before they decided, okay, so, we have to defer it because you're putting us on lockdown. And so even that, they were greedy to the point that when it comes to them collecting, don't you think so? That when it comes to collecting taxes from the citizenry, they have very little flexibility in doing so. But when it comes for them to be generous with other people's money, then it's okay. You just say that, yeah, you can do that. Give it to them. Yeah. So I think that's the reality is that many smaller businesses will not even have the resources to weather this storm. That means to say, many of them are in debt for working capital, for their for putting up the restaurants and things like that. Many of the people who have borrowed money for their auto loans and other credit card loans, uh, you know being unable to sustain uh, their amortization payments for 1 or 2 months, will mean to say that they will not be able to continue making those types of payments, which causes a domino effect in terms of the banks having some foreclosures, and the inability of people who have housing loans, auto loans, and all kinds of consumer loans be in default in i- their outstanding obligations, which of course means to say that even if they were to somehow manage to keep on their payments, they certainly will not be able to add to them in the near future. So that will be a slowdown in the consumer demand.
Mm. It looks a bit dark from that standpoint. So how long do you think this will last? I know no one knows yet how. I think the catalyst for this is when they find the cure, when the lockdown will end. But is
Well,
there an estimate or a projection on, at least, so when people see this, they have some sort of they could build some sort of cash position to protect them also.
it's too late to build a cash position now because the cash flow has stopped.
Mm.
So the thing there is that the worst thing that the government can do is that while we do have a few hundred people that have passed away recently from the coronavirus, I think more people will be affected by the economic downturn, by the lack of a wage that they can take home to their families. So
Mm.
that one will be a more substantial problem that the government will have to face. Now, it's very easy for government to appear very sympathetic and say, okay, we'll extend the lockdown for another month or so to make it May or June or whatever. Well, they can easily say that. And they say that, oh, no, we're doing this to protect the people. But in reality, they're not really doing anything to save the people. Like, what have they done for the businessmen, the small and medium entrepreneurs? What have they done for those people that they've said, oh, you're on lockdown, you can't go to work and things like that. So all of these things will catch up with them. And unfortunately, in the world of politics, if people are hungry or unhappy, then obviously the political situation will again change, in that different politics will come into play.
Mm. Okay. Since people have no choice, no cash, should they sell their assets? What's a possible scenario out of this, or they just close as early as now already, thinking that if things are not just gonna get any better, might as well cut their losses as early as now already.
No, this is exactly my point, that the government shouldn't get carried away by overextending the lockdown, because that one, like I said, while we suffer a few hundred casualties in terms of deaths, from the virus, we will have thousands of people that will die from hunger or panic or from other situations.
Mm.
So the government should really think about taking the next steps by, for example, like I said, it's very easy for them to say, oh, we love the people. We can't afford the people to die. We can't afford the people to get sick. So we will need to extend this quarantine period. But in reality, that is the one that's going to kill the people, not the few hundred people that die from that. I think we have more people that die from regular road accidents on a daily basis. Now, the other thing that we should consider is, once the people have started to go back to work, what we need to try to do is to bring things back on a regular basis as soon as possible. And at the same time, we have to understand that the reason why all of this panic and all of these problems are occurring is because there doesn't seem to be any cure yet. You see, once people are not afraid to get a cold or a cough, because they can just go to the drugstore and get a cough medicine or a cold medicine, and they'll be fine. If they get a fever, they get a fever medicine and they'll be fine. But with this one, it's not something that they can just get from any store. So I think with the recent announcements of possible cures that they have discovered, from coming in from Japan and coming in from other places, no, then maybe that's good enough, so that we can just accelerate the availability of these products into the market, so that the people don't panic and are allowed to continue on with the economic recovery, or continue on with having their regular lives back.
Mm. So it's predicated on how long the lockdown would be, no?
I
But
think so. I
oh,
think I think so. The lockdown is something that, uh, like I said, it's very easy to say, "Oh, lockdown lahat." I mean, so the government doesn't get blamed for saying, "Oh, see, the government didn't lock down. That's why we have many more deaths." But in reality, that one is the real problem. Now, but like I said, we have to be careful about how we use that lockdown, because if we overuse it, then it's going to create more damage than good.
okay.
So the thing there is, we need to make sure that we are on top of the situation when it comes to finding the cure. Meaning to say, if there is a cure, then the FDA can probably accelerate the trials together with other countries to see how that's going along. Because considering that the death rate is quite high, particularly for the older folk, then maybe trial runs can be accelerated also to avoid further casualties.
Okay. Let's just make I just
Mhm.
wanna have a more
Sure.
optimistic scenario. What if the lockdown would last? I've seen some projections that they said the peak of the coronavirus in the Philippines will be up until May. What if the lockdown extends up until June? And I'm an entrepreneur right now. Uh, what's the best thing that they can do when all of this is something that they can't control anymore?
Well, it's like uh, I don't think that many small entrepreneurs can survive, no? Because even the malls that they're renting from for the restaurants and other businesses, they're only given a 1 month reprieve or something like that. But in reality, if you were to say that this is going to hang on for another 2 or 3 or 4 months, then it's impossible for businesses to be. The problem is that it's okay if the businesses were just to close, meaning say they close, they don't need to pay any employee salaries, they don't need to pay for any rentals, they don't need to pay for any utilities. But no, what the government wants them to do is to still pay the employees, is to still pay taxes, is to still pay all of these uh, overhead expenses like rentals. So how do you do that as a businessman? How do you maintain paying for all of these things while you are in a lockdown situation where your revenues are cut off but your expenses continue?
Mm,
So, like in any, as you know, depends on what your burn rate is. But I don't think many companies have a burn rate ability for more than 1 or 2 months.
mm,
So we've used up our reserves with just this first one because this first lockdown is already 1 month worth.
mm,
So if you're going to say let's add another 15 days, it's going to be wipe out a few 100,000 more businesses.
mm,
And the problem with that is that once these businesses are gone, then to just re-establish them is another problem because it takes a while for businesses to save up
mm,
so that you can have enough capital to risk
mm,
and put up the business, as you're aware of. But what happens is that if all of your capital is gone, then how do you restart it? You won't be able to restart it. You need to have, maybe you need to work somewhere else again or save up money again, and it'll take you years before you can do that,
mm.
before you can follow your entrepreneurial dreams again.
And I've seen it now. I've received so many messages already that a lot of them are scared that if this drags on for 2 months, they don't have cash even for payroll
Precisely.
already. Also,
Precisely. Yeah, and that will also affect the government in the sense that without them realizing it, all of these small businesses that clog up the city hall for their mayor's permits are the ones giving them the money, are the ones giving city hall the money. And the sad situation is that uh, supposedly, I've heard some of these barangays and some of these local governments say, "Oh no, we don't need to give any assistance to all of these people living in the villages and things like that."
mm,
But in reality, these are the ones that are keeping you afloat. They're the ones that are paying your taxes. They're the ones that are providing the business opportunities, and they're also suffering as well. And some of them are really, while they live in nicer villages, some of them are really retired and they really have no source of income, and therefore they're also vulnerable. And to say that they don't need or they don't deserve to be given anything, I think that that's another fatal mistake that the government's making.
and I think because a lot of the middle class also are leveraged, so that means it multiplies. So there's an amount of debt that they are paying out also on a regular basis. That being said, you've seen you've I assume you've seen different cycles as well. How does this compare to the '97 crash? Is this any different, or is this
Yeah,
worse?
this is quite different because those crashes um, are not bottomless pits. No? I mean, you know that the crash was caused because of a bubble here in the real estate or subprime lending and things like that. But in this case, the real problem is the uncertainty of finding a cure for a disease, which will continue with the uh, with a scare until we find the cure for the disease, which I hope is already forthcoming, and the ones that they have identified are going to be effective.
Mhm, mhm. Uh, yeah, it's very very different though, and
Yes.
That being said, also, in a crisis like this, a lot of entrepreneurs are saying also that there could be opportunities hidden in this. Is there any are there any sectors or businesses that you could suggest to people that may emerge from this, maybe a good business to start when all of this is said and done as well?
Well, you know, I see that you also invest in the equities, no?
Mm,
And many times it has been said that the best time to buy into the market is when there's blood on the streets.
mm,
So obviously, assets are, equities are undervalued at this particular time. So this could be a good time for you to cherry pick certain assets if you're looking for uh, real estate assets. Then maybe the people who can no longer to afford to amortize their real estate holdings, they might have to give it up. The banks, the people that the real estate companies that had put up these businesses, they might be in a situation to say that okay, we can't hold on to this because we've overextended ourselves. We need to sell it at a more reasonable price. So that could be an opportunity in itself, in that you are now given the chance to buy into assets which, let's say, 6 months ago were really too high to justify the acquisition cost. But having gone down by 20, 30, or even 40%, this could be a good buying opportunity for you. But of course, this is only available for those people who were uh,
yeah.
fortunate enough to have some reserves or a war chest.
Mm. Well said. So yeah, it's pretty much true. No, a lot of the stocks that were high 2 years ago or more than a year ago, some of them dropped more than 50%. Especially
Yeah,
last time, everything started to drop in the Philippine market.
unravel. Yeah,
Yeah. Just to end this, no,
sure.
um, there are a lot of people who don't know what will happen. There are a lot of people who are fearful. Any words of encouragement for them, especially for those that you've mentioned that a lot of the businesses right now may not survive this. Anything that you can impart to them to somehow equip them or push them that hey, there's still hope, there's still a chance that you could still move forward from this.
Well, of course, the first thing that I can say is the fact that they can still listen to your blog is a good thing, right? Because that means to say they're still alive, right? So that to me is the very uh, primal thing in this whole affair, no? In that you need to be alive to be able to recover. So as long as you're still alive, you didn't die or something like that, then uh, that's always a good thing, right? So that's always a good thing. You live to fight another day. Now
Mm,
the other thing that you have to think of is that this is not 100-meter dash. This is a marathon.
mm,
Okay, so sometimes it takes a while for things to recover, but we always know that whether it takes a few years or a few months, it always does recover. So you should be ready to take advantage of that situation. Now, the thing there is, how do you take advantage of that situation? Obviously, by being prudent with your finances, meaning to say that you need to know how to save properly. You need to know what to spend on. You need to know what to invest in, and all of these things, you build up your knowledge through the many years of experience that you hopefully are able to generate from the hardships, the upturn and downturns in the economy through these cycles.
I said that was my last question, but while you were speaking,
Sure.
it was just something that came into my remembrance. For people whose businesses are in trouble, what do you
Uh-huh.
suggest? Number one, would it be prudent that they use? Oh, your videos out.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Would it be more prudent that they first choice, use personal money to keep funding the business. Number two, they take out a loan to be able to at least paglaban pa rin nila to see that there's still a fighting chance. Or number three, would it be more prudent that they find another partner or investor that still has cash, that's willing to put money into them during this time as well?
Well, uh, there is such a thing as throwing good money after bad. So the first thing you need to do is don't be trigger happy. Um, let it sink in for a while. You have enough time for the market to crawl back to where it was. So don't just jump the gun and start borrowing money and buying things across the board, because this will take more than a few weeks or even a few months. So
Mm,
that's the first thing. Don't get trigger happy. Just be more circumspect with what the situation is, and think very carefully about your next moves. Now, you also have to take a look at what the government's reaction to all of these things will be, whether they will give some tax incentives, or whether they will not listen to anything and just charge more and more, like they feel that they have to recover, and normally the government, what it does is it just taxes the people more.
mm,
So that, yeah, well, which is true, right? So the thing there is that you need to slow down a bit. So there is no rush. It's not like it's a fire sale that's good only for one day. No, no.
mm,
This is going to take more than that. So you just need to be even keeled about the whole thing,
mm,
and you just need to uh, slow down a bit. Just slow down, give yourself some time to think,
mm,
and let's just all hope the government doesn't feel like, oh, another round of another round of this lockdown will be good for everybody. Well, I don't think so.
mm,
But they're the ones that's going to suffer for it, because when election time comes and people remember that they had no more money, they had nothing to spend, and they all lost their houses, they all lost their kids could no longer afford to go to school. I think that will all come back into play.
mm.
So the thing there is the government really should just give people hope, in that if there is a cure, they are able to bring it to market at the right time and pace and at the right cost. Yeah.
This is really my final question, and I got it from your final.
Sure. Go ahead.
You were talking about years of experience, no? In
Mm.
business. Was there a time in any of your businesses that you owned or you run yourself that uh, it was in trouble, and then you sort of turned it around? Either it was something because something was happening in the economy, or just a competitor, or something was shifting. So that the reason why I'm asking this is there might be people who might relate to this, and they might get some ideas off of that as well.
Sure. I've run many businesses that have gone into. I managed them when they were not doing so well, and we've turned them around into profitable businesses. All you need to do is find out what the bottlenecks are, where the log jams are, and to see what you can do to get the revenues flowing back on stream. So that's the most important thing. You need to be more analytical in what you're doing. You need to understand what the challenges that the company faces are, and be able to find solutions to these problems. So there is no one answer for every situation, but uh, i- it's a system of being able to solve what the problem is and finding a solution for it, and then making sure that it works and it is executed properly, so that you can go back into profitability, which is the most important thing for the long-term viability of any company.
Did it come to a point that you wanted to quit already? You wanted to. This is not worth it. I'll just stop this.
Yeah, it would come to the point that you do know that you have a certain window of opportunity to either make a go of it or not, because you'll run out of money. So that is the biggest factor there. So in this case, I think that we've used up all of our reserves with the 1 month lockdown. I mean, you say, I'm talking about the small entrepreneurs. No, typically you can't expect them to have zero revenues and all expenses for a month, right? Uh, maybe maybe half of them will survive, half of them won't. But what happens is that if you extend that for another 2 weeks or another month, then you can expect that even more people will go out of business.
Okay. Thank you so much for that insight. No, and
Okay.
And what I've been doing is we've been collating different experiences from different entrepreneurs so that a lot of people who are watching this get to benefit from this as well. So thank you so much for your
Sure.
time, George Chua.
My
And
pleasure. My pleasure.
for those who are watching, if you guys have any questions, leave them on the comment section and we'll try to make videos off of that as well. And I hope this video helps you trade well, trade strong, trade smart. See you all again soon, guys, and God bless you.